On March 24th, a headline finally pierced 53 days of silence. FBI analysis yields a key break in the Nancy Guthrie case. And don't just dismiss this. Don't assume it's just clickbait with no substance. Hear me out, because this time, breakthrough isn't media hype. The source is the Puma County Sheriff, confirming on camera what the FBI's forensic tech uncovered in a live interview. And once you grasp precisely what was discovered and its impact on the investigation, you will see this case completely differently. Here's the part that's being overlooked. This is the real story. First, the timeline is essential, as the new development hinges on what we didn't know before. January 31st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old, took an Uber from her Catalina Foothills home in Tucson for dinner with her daughter Annie and husband Tommaso Cion. She arrived home around 9:48 p.m. The garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. Inside her home of many years, she was safe and settling in for the night. That was the last normal recorded moment. At 1:47 a.m., her front door's Google Nest camera was cut off. It was physically disabled, not hacked. Then, at 2:12 a.m., a separate camera's motion sensor detected a presence on the property. No video. She lacked a recording plan for that particular device. Then, at 2:28 a.m., in the case's most critical event, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from her phone. The device tracking her heartbeat simply went offline. 3 timestamps, 41 minutes. During that time, an event unfolded that has consumed the FBI, the Puma County Sheriff's Department, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and a dedicated task force working non-stop ever since. The next day, February 1st, Nancy failed to join a scheduled online church service. Her friends couldn't reach her. A relative arrived. Doors locked, phone and purse left behind. Everything an 84-year-old woman would have taken if she had chosen to leave. She was gone. The authorities arrived. It became a crime scene. Blood was found near the door. DNA later confirmed it was Nancy's blood. Sheriff Chris Nanos stated he believes she was forcibly taken. The FBI joined the case immediately. The ensuing investigation has generated over 19,000 separate tips. A task force of Puma County deputies and FBI agents assigned only to this case since early March, also using aerial resources, cadaver dogs, reviewing surveillance, with forensics handled by a private lab in Florida. And through 53 days, no official from law enforcement would publicly confirm any link to her before the night she vanished, establishing no prior contact, no previous confirmed visit to the home, until March 23rd. This is the point the case turned, beginning with a pair of photographs. On February 10th, the FBI published stills taken from Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera, 2026. Showing the public a masked figure in a full balaclava, jacket, and gloves, wearing a chest holster with what looked like a handgun. The man wore a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiking pack and stood roughly 5'9" to 5'10". He had a medium build and walked straight at the camera, purposefully and with precision, lifting a gloved hand to obscure the view. This is the picture that comes to mind for most when they think of the night Nancy went missing. However, the FBI circulated more than a single photograph. In another picture, the very same disguised person is seen on the premises. Same physique, same ski mask, yet without the backpack, no weapon in sight, no tactical clothing, just there, on her property. A source briefed on the case confirmed for Fox News Digital that one of the doorbell pictures was captured on a separate day. This implies the masked individual could have scouted the residence before the February 1st kidnapping. The Pima County Sheriff's Department did acknowledge the pictures, which depicted the person in various states of dress, but claimed any idea the images were from different dates was, in their own words, entirely conjecture. And that's how the situation remained for several weeks before Google's findings changed everything.
I'm coming on here because we have a little bit of new reporting that I wanted to share with you. We just reported this on the Today Show, it's all stemming from that January 11th date that we know that investigators have been asking neighbors for footage from. And as you probably saw in Savannah's statement, the family's statement they put out over the weekend, they asked for renewed attention to this case, and they specifically asked their Tucson neighbors to look for footage from that weekend of Nancy's abduction, as well as the evening of January 11th. So I talked to Sheriff Nanos yesterday to ask him, like, okay, now that Savannah is bringing up this date, can you share with us a little bit more about why investigators are asking about it? Because we do know that investigators have been looking into the possibility the suspect visited Nancy's home prior to the abduction, but no official, no authority, the sheriff hasn't come out and ever said exactly why January 11th has been a date they're asking about. And the FBI, by the way, is also not commenting. And just for those who have been asking, Sheriff Nanos is the only official in this case that is speaking publicly in the investigative capacity. The FBI is not doing interviews. So I ended up talking to the sheriff yesterday, and this is what he told me about January 11th. He actually, for the first time, told us the origin of that date and the significance. He said that January 11th came to them from Google as they've been helping to try to retrieve the Nest camera surveillance footage from Nancy's doorbell camera. Google owns Nest. He says that when Google was able to retrieve some of those surveillance images that we've all seen, that Google came to them and said, this particular image, that one that doesn't show the suspect wearing a backpack, that we believe that's from January 11th. There's a possibility it was January 11th. He says that then, I don't know how many days later, but at some point later, Google came back to them and took that back. He says they came back and said, actually, never mind. We cannot definitively say that that photo was from January 11th or any specific date. So this explains why Sheriff Nanos has kind of maintained now this whole time that yes, there's a possibility that photo is from an earlier date. Yes, there's a possibility the suspect visited Nancy's home prior to the abduction, but we cannot say so definitively. We now know why he's saying that, and he says it stems from Google and what Google told them.
Google, which manages the cloud
the entity that oversees cloud metadata for Nest camera products, originally informed authorities that the backpack-free image was thought to have been taken on January 11th, 21 days before the kidnapping. Based on that information, authorities started considering January 11th as a possible earlier visit. Residents were requested to review their own camera recordings from that particular night. The Guthrie family was alerted to the date's importance, and then Google retracted its claim. The corporation informed officials it was unable to confirm the photo was from January 11th or any other day. As Nanos put it, Google first presented the date as a likelihood, but then withdrew the assertion. The inquiry would have hit a dead end were it not for the FBI's next move. On March 23, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos gave an interview to Tucson's Cole 13 News. He revealed something no official had publicly stated since the case opened. We strongly suspect an incident took place on the 11th, and this is based on the FBI's own analysis of the hardware and digital evidence. Grasp the weight of that statement. This is the FBI's finding, not Google's. Two completely different reviews of the identical evidence. Google checked its cloud data, noted January 11th, then backed away. The Bureau did its own forensic review of the actual Nest camera, the device itself, and came to the exact same conclusion. One finding was withdrawn, the other remains firm. This isn't a tip-off, it isn't a lead from a hotline, it's not media hearsay. It's the county sheriff on the record, confirming the FBI's own forensic methods led to a specific finding about a particular date. 21 days before Nancy Guthrie was abducted, an event occurred on her property. The day prior to that KOD interview, on March 21st, the Guthrie family issued a public appeal via KVOA News for Tucson's special report, directly asking the local community to recall events from two periods: the evening of January 31st into early February 1st, and the late hours of January 11th. Families involved in ongoing kidnapping cases don't release specific dates publicly without coordinating with investigators. The family would never have highlighted January 11th to the public unless law enforcement indicated that date was critical. That family appeal and the Nanos interview aren't unrelated events. They are a single development, announced consecutively over 2 days, with both pointing to the identical date from different angles. Now consider the behavioral implications of January 11th. If the Bureau's finding holds true, if an individual was on Nancy Guthrie's grounds 21 days before returning to abduct her, they were present without the gear, without the pack, and without any weapon. They were there in the manner of someone conducting surveillance, gathering information, to find out, to learn the camera's angles, the area's rhythm, how the street appeared at that time, the true proximity of neighbors, and what lights turned on and when. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffin Daffer publicly called this visit what she considers a practice run, a dry run before the main event, for a crime that demanded such a high degree of precision. A culprit who knew the camera's exact location, approached it directly, and concealed it before anything else happened, is not someone acting on impulse. This was calculated, and if a clear starting point for the planning is now set at January 11th, that implies more visibility, more trips through the area, more instances where this individual was there, observable and trackable. This leads to the most critical forensic consequence. If the assailant was on that property on January 11th, his genetic material might not have been left only on February 1st. It could have been there for 21 days on any surface he came into contact with, any physical contact with the property during that initial survey. This leads to the piece of evidence that, once processed, will close this case. In mid-February, Puma County Sheriff Nanos confirmed that unidentified DNA, genetic code not from Nancy or any of her regular contacts, was discovered in the house. Authorities speculate it could belong to the intruder. The problem is, the sample is a composite. It has genetic signatures from multiple people, which necessitates another analytical phase to separate the suspect's unique profile before it can be cross-referenced with any identification databases. Nanos admitted the hurdles were significant and that sorting out the sample might take weeks, months, or, in a worst-case scenario, as long as a year. But C.C. Moore, the head genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, a lab based in Virginia that has aided in solving over 300 cases with DNA, provided essential perspective during a February appearance on the Today Show. She noted that complex samples are entirely possible to work with, and that law enforcement has found success with such mixtures previously. She added that discovering the unknown DNA within the residence makes it even more, not less, probable that it's linked to the person who gained entry. She also pinpointed the specific way the intruder likely left his DNA behind, unwittingly. Footage from the FBI shows the masked person holding what looks like a flashlight in his mouth, keeping his hands free to work on Nancy's front door. Moore observed that when you take an object out of your mouth, saliva instantly coats your gloves, and gloved hands that subsequently touch anything inside a residence will leave DNA behind. As she stated, he almost certainly would have had his DNA on the exterior of that glove, and he must have touched something within that home. In March, Moore elaborated even more. On News Nation's The Truth of the Matter podcast, she advised that authorities go back to Nancy's house and perform more forensic tests, searching precisely for a hair without a root. A hair shed naturally, lacking its follicle, still carries mitochondrial DNA. Current forensic science can build a complete genetic profile from that amount of material. In her words, DNA is surprisingly resilient. If they haven't found his DNA yet, it's still somewhere at that crime scene. That guidance is built on a foundation of over 300 successfully closed cases. After a viable DNA profile is separated, authorities can run it through genealogy sites like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. Two key databases are currently at law enforcement's disposal, where forensic genealogists use partial DNA matches to distant kin to construct a family tree, tracing lines back with ancestry files, birth certificates, and census data, until the search narrows to a single person who fits the physical description and geographic area identified by the investigation. This is the exact method that unmasked the Golden State Killer after 5 decades. It led to the University of Idaho murder suspect's identity in under 2 months. The Puma County Sheriff's Department has stated that its investigators are pursuing these avenues. A federal law enforcement insider informed CBS News that authorities are additionally reviewing commercial DNA databases outside of CODIS, which itself holds approximately 22 million profiles. Now, I want you to hear for yourself what C.C. Moore stated on the Today Show. Quote, "If I were the person responsible, I would be deeply worried right now, because investigative genetic genealogy will lead to his identification." End quote. Not that it might, but that it will. That woman is the chief genetic genealogist at one of America's most prestigious forensic labs. She has over 300 solved cases to her credit, and her assertion was made without any hesitation. While the forensic work continues, another investigation has been simultaneously underway on the streets of Catalina foothills. In March's third week, federal investigators revisited Newthwise neighborhood, inquiring about two particular topics. The first involved a home that was vacated just prior to New York's disappearance. A nearby resident had recently departed. Agents questioned locals about that person, including the timing and reason for their move. Officials were careful to avoid publicly tying that specific home to the incident. But for a crime that relied on intimate local awareness sharp enough to know a doorbell camera's exact location and the ideal time for an approach, a neighbor who moves out so close to the abduction is a factor that must be fully investigated. The second topic was construction workers. They wanted names, not just vague reports of strange activity. A complete list of every single contractor and worker on building sites throughout that community in the days and weeks preceding February 1st. Quote, I know that within the last 24 hours, the FBI has been back in the neighborhood of Nancy Guthrie, checking in with residents, with people who live near NY's home, and they're asking about a couple of new things. There are a few houses being built in the vicinity, but one in particular, I have been told, is where they are attempting to get the names of every person who worked on the house, like the construction teams and contractors, and they are trying to assemble a list of those names, which is quite interesting. It's not completely unheard of. I mean, they are likely just checking every possible lead, but this is a fresh development. They are also asking about, there is one residence where the occupants moved out right before Nancy disappeared. I am told they have been inquiring about those former residents. Once again, I believe they are just making sure to be thorough. But they have indeed returned to the neighborhood in the last day or so, merely checking in with neighbors. But getting details from construction sites seemed like a really smart angle. Ex-FBI agent Steve Moore clearly explained the logic. Building crews can be on a neighborhood street for hours without issue. They get clear views of the adjacent homes. A work truck parked at odd hours in Catalina foothills raises no alarms. If someone watched New York's home for weeks before February 1st while keeping a credible and valid presence in the area, a builder's list is precisely the group the FBI must vet, clear, or flag. A third line of inquiry exists. In October 2025, The Today Show shot a segment on Savannah Guthrie's return to her Tucson hometown. It aired November 2025, under 3 months before Nancy's abduction. Their last stop was El Charro Cafe, a Tucson fixture running since 1922, holding the unique distinction as the longest-running family-owned Mexican spot in the United States. Savannah, Nancy, and sister Annie ate a meal on camera for a national broadcast. NY's identity, her link to a famous daughter, and her Tucson base reached millions. Per Brian Enton of News Nation, federal agents later visited El Charro, asking staff about that day, inquiring if anyone there behaved unusually, took photos, or loitered near the film crew. Enton's sources reported the visit, which major news outlets have not confirmed independently. The establishment's president, Ray Flores, told the Tucson Daily Star that at that point, investigators hadn't contacted him. The element connecting all of these threads, the builder's list, the empty home, and the cafe visit, is one question. How did the person at the door on February 1st get the key information for this crime? By name, by address, and by frame. The Bureau is constructing that answer. This is the true breakthrough. This isn't one finding. It's where multiple lines of inquiry converge. Everyone now points the same way. The FBI's separate forensic check of the Nest hardware yielded a firm conclusion on January 11th. Google's cloud data showed the same date, and they fell back. The Guthries publicly asked for the community's focus on that specific night, a step families in open cases take only when directed by law enforcement. And the sheriff, Nanos, affirmed the FBI's theory to Cole 13 News on March 23, 2026. That is the cornerstone, the piece revealing the puzzle's true shape to investigators. Unidentified DNA from NY's home is being run through methods that have solved decades-old cases. The top public expert on that method has stated on record, The individual whose DNA was left will be found. The Bureau holds the names of builders working in the area before February 1st. They are vetting a neighbor who moved out pre-disappearance. They've reconstructed her public activities in the months leading up to her abduction. Sheriff Nanos made a public statement to Cole. A vast amount of information is before us, and we are confident in the evidence it holds. Could the trail go cold? Might I be mistaken? Of course, nothing is certain, but we will not stop searching. And former FBI agent Greg Rogers said to Parade magazine, "I'm sure significant familial DNA work is being done." No announcements will be made unless a potential person of interest is found. There will be no statements until there is something concrete to report. This investigation is active. Time is critical for forensics. January 11th has become a definite point of reference. The individual who visited that property, arriving empty-handed, then leaving with a pack, left a clue. Nancy Guthrie was 84. She had a meal with relatives on a Saturday evening. She drove home. She was not at church the following day. She is owed the truth. This investigation is progressing. When the story breaks, and it will, we'll be here to guide you through it all. The precise method of his capture, and what 53 days of clues finally confirmed. Follow us now because you won't want to learn about the breakthrough. 14 days later. Behind every case lies a powerful reminder. Truth doesn't disappear, it waits to be uncovered. This story shows how silence, assumptions, and missed details can delay justice, but persistence can change everything. It teaches us to stay aware, to question what doesn't feel right, and to value every piece of evidence, no matter how small. More importantly, it reminds us that real lives are affected, families waiting, hoping, and hurting. Justice is not just about solving a case, it's about accountability, empathy, and never giving up on the truth.